So hello, everyone, and today for Pillow Talk, lesser known stories from Yoko Ono and John Lennon's BED-IN-FOR-PEACE campaign. My name is Ryan Doherty, and I'm curator here at Contemporary Calgary, where we are proudly presenting Yoko Ono, Growing Freedom, a two-part exhibition made up of the Instructions of Yoko Ono and the Art of John and Yoko. Joining us today are Joan Athey and Minnie Yorke, custodians of the Gerry, Deiter, and Ritchie Yorke archives, respectively, that form an integral part of Growing Freedom. Their knowledge of this particular time surrounding events like the BED-IN-FOR-PEACE and War is Over campaigns is unparalleled, and we're delighted they've agreed to share some of their stories. Before a more thorough introduction, Joan, Minnie, and myself would like to start with some land acknowledgements. So on behalf of Contemporary Calgary, I'd like to honor and acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all of the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We also acknowledge our immediate proximity to the Bow River, a site that resonates with us all today and with Indigenous populations for thousands of years. I'll pass it to you.
I'm I'm here on the west coast of Canada, and I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Lekwungen people from southern Vancouver Island.
And hello there, I'm talking to you from Australia, and I would like to pay my respects to the Turrbal and Yarraga peoples as the custodians of the land where I work, study and live. I acknowledge that the sovereignty was never seceded either. Let's hope it can change soon.
Thank you. I'd like now to more properly introduce our guests and their projects. Joan Athey has worked with creative people all her life. A marketing and promotion strategist for over 20 years, she spent the bulk of her career as a communications specialist with the CBC in Vancouver. Born in Toronto, Joan's father ran a camera shop on Danforth Avenue, where she was exposed to the magic of photography. She learned about journalism, working for the Toronto Star as an entertainment writer. Eventually making her way to the West Coast via Edmonton, Joan learned about music production in the studios at the CBC. Now, for the last 11 years, she has been the curator of the precious archive of images that Gerry Deiter took in 1969 of John and Yoko and others, exhibiting them to over 200,000 people in Liverpool, Coventry, Bogota, San Diego, Tokyo, and elsewhere, and now Calgary, Alberta. A little bit on Gerry. He was a native of Brooklyn, New York. He apprenticed with Francis Scavulo, a famous New Yorker known for his controversial portraits of celebrities. As a photographer, Gerry's career varied from the gruesome, like crime and medical photography, to the sublime as a fashion photographer for Women's Wear Daily. He was a friend of Timothy Leary's, a photojournalist for the Village Voice, Time, and Life magazines, as well as teaching as the Pratt Institute. Through his involvement with the Manhattan avant-garde art scene, Deiter was introduced to Yoko Ono, and in 1969, on assignment for Life magazine, he attended John Lennon and Yoko Ono's bed-in at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, the subject of our talk tonight. Intending to stay a few hours, he stayed the entire 8 days, the only still photographer to do so. Life magazine never ran the photographs, and he hid them away for nearly 40 years. We're also grateful that his friend Joan purchased the archive of over 400 slides and negatives in 2007 to carry on Deiter's desire to rekindle the spirit of give peace a chance. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you.
Minnie Yorke is the custodian of the Ritchie Yorke archive and has been working toward cataloging and digitizing Ritchie's life work for several years. Now, for the first time, some of the archive's treasures are being shared through the exhibition, Growing Freedom, which we're pleased to present at Contemporary Calgary. Minnie has a background in fashion, works in film and television. After getting together with Richie in 2005, she got involved in the music business. Minnie and Richie married in 2013, and Minnie is currently seeking a home for Richie's extensive archive, which contains materials from as far back as 1962, a slice of history touching upon the lives and works of many of the musical greats, including John and Yoko. A little more about Richie. He was a Brisbane-born music author and journalist. He was the first full-time writer for the Globe and Mail, served as Billboard's Canadian editor for a decade in the 70s and for Rolling Stone. He's penned books on Led Zeppelin, Van Morrison, and more recently, John and Yoko. Yorke was instrumental in Lennon's International Peace Envoy in 1969. He aided the staging of John and Yoko's famed Montreal BED-IN and their appearance at the famed Toronto Rock and Roll Revival concert. So with introductions complete, again, it is a great pleasure to have you both here representing these important archives. I can tell you that installing growing freedom here at Contemporary Calgary has been an extraordinary honor. And it is in no small part due to your generosity in sharing all this incredible material. There are so many photographs and artifacts in this exhibition that resonate with people, whether as a record of a historical moment that pervades our culture or simply as a really beautiful aesthetic image. Something as mundane as a roach clip becomes altogether different when you know it was John and Yoko's, and even more so when you know it was used during the BED-IN. So these objects and images are loaded with significance and stories. And so to start things off, we asked the two of you to share some of your personal favorites, and you've graciously developed a short presentation. So Joan, may I ask you to begin?
Right on.
There you go.
Yep, that's me, all right. And this is a beautiful picture. I never get tired of looking at it and telling people about it. You could line up and visit with them in the room. Derek Taylor would peek out into the hallway, look at the long line of people, and then he would pick somebody who looked interesting, who happened to be there. It was surprisingly inclusive, and he let in a group of young blind students. In the course of their interview with John, they gave him a Braille watch, and that is what he's holding in his hand. He's running his finger around the raised numbers, and you can see that he's not looking at it. In fact, he's got his head tilted to one side. He's imagining what it would be like to be blind. It shows the empathy that he has, and also the fact that he himself was nearly blind without his glasses. You can see that the lenses are really thick. And I learned that his manager was often afraid that because of his vanity, he didn't wear his glasses on stage when he was a Beatle. They were always afraid he'd fall off the stage and kill himself. The beauty of Gerry Deiter's photographs, for the black and white ones, is that 35 millimeter quality picks up every detail, including the blister that you can see from Lennon being a guitar player. And that's a good one to look at. And once again, we have a very interesting picture. It is still, in fact, the blind people there. But when I took this image to the Montreal Museum of Fine Art, the director looked at it, and she didn't look at John Lennon. She looked at Yoko, and she looked at what she was eating, probably a ball of rice. And that the way she is putting it into her mouth, she said, that's a cultural gesture. And there's John himself. He has a spoon and a bowl of some kind of brown rice. They were on a macrobiotic diet. And he's very relaxed, just lying so casually there on the bedspread that one of the fans had brought. Plus, you can see all the flowers and bits and pieces that were brought, and they're put on the windowsill during the BED-IN. And this beautiful picture, just look at it. The look in her eyes. If you've ever been in love, you know how it feels to look at the object of your affection. Lennon is just out of the frame of the picture. She's reaching over and she's touching him. The light is shining on her hair, and their vulnerability is even more enhanced because she's wearing a very fine cotton nightgown. One of the things that the eyewitnesses, whose essays I have, told me was that they were wondering if when they went in to see John and Yoko that it was nothing more than a shallow hype. But in fact, they were all incredibly moved by the sincerity and the honesty of what message they were trying to put out. And this is the classic. I can't help but smile when I see it. This was where the name the Plastic Ono Band came from. So this is the first rendition of the Plastic Ono Band. There's Tommy Smothers with the guitar. The guitar had suddenly been brought in by the young fellow in the striped shirt, and that is Tony Lashta. Up until the time that I found him, nobody knew where he was. Documentarians have traced numerous people in the pictures, but they couldn't find him. And one day I got a phone call that said, my husband is surprised at how many times he's in your book. And actually, he finished out the rest of his life in Spruce Grove. So, in Alberta, right? Of course. Pardon me. So, so anyhow, his story was absolutely remarkable. He was a bellboy, 17 years old, his first day on the job, and he sweated and slaved helping to carry 54 pieces of luggage up to room 1742, up to the 17th floor. They didn't travel lightly. They had a film crew with them, and there was a lot of baggage. They actually rented more than just the one 1742. At the end of the time, the other more experienced bellboys said, did you get a good tip when you carried all those up? And he said, well, yeah, I did. And they said, well, here, you can get some more. You go up, you knock on the door, and you say, is there anything I can get for you? So that's what he did. And when he knocked on 1742, a security guard answered. And, he said, no, they're not here. And that's because the room was the location for their event, and the bed was actually their stage. They didn't sleep in the room. They slept in one of the other rooms down the way. So he listened to the first door. No, listened to the second door, and he had patered. He could hear people laughing, music, clinking glasses. It was pretty loud. So he thought, I better knock loudly. And he knocked very loudly. And there was absolute silence from behind the door. Everything stopped. He's 17 years old. He's a cheeky bellboy. He tries the door handle. The door opens. He steps in, and he's caught them smoking marijuana. That was very dangerous at the time. And the bed-in could have been shut down completely if he'd been shocked or reported it. So he said, well, hello, picture him with his little cap on and his uniform. Can I get you anything? Cigarettes, coffee, maybe go for a newspaper. And if I were you, I'd take that bag of marijuana off the top of the television. So Derek Taylor leapt up, snatched it, stuffed it under the seat of the sofa. And cheeky bellboy goes and sits on the edge of the credenza and said, now do you want me to go and get you some cigarettes or a coffee or a newspaper? And Derek said, I have a much better idea. Why don't you come and work for us in the room? So he ran down to his locker, threw his uniform into the space, went to his manager and said, they want me to help out. I want to do it. So that's what he did. And he did such a good job coordinating the requests between housekeeping and what the group wanted, that at the end of it, Lennon said to him, my personal assistant in London is a complete asshole. How would you like to come and work for me? So what a beautiful story. The first day he's carrying their luggage. On the 8th day, he's traveling first class in an airplane to London with a Lennon entourage wearing one of Lennon's white suits. He had quite an interesting time there. He spent a year and a half living at Tittenhurst with them. And in late 1971, he returned back to Canada and opened a Carnaby-style fashion store and went on with his life from there. I managed to get his whole story from him 6 weeks before he sadly died. He had lung cancer. So that was a real one of these magical things that happens when you start working with John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
That's right. It's true. It's so true.
Thank you, Joan. Those
Okay.
were some great faves. I can see why those ones stand out for you from this particular moment.
There's so many. It's hard to select.
Yeah. Truly. Minnie, you've also prepared a few things to show us.
Yes. So yes, that opening picture was us in a show at in LA, where we caught up with Yoko. Fabulous show. Lady Gaga was on the bill, Iggy Pop, and of course Sean was the musical director. It was a fabulous show.
Oh, nice.
So the next shot, and there we are at the bed-in. So that's Richie sitting on the floor there. His role was, he'd actually been working for the Globe and Mail. John asked, they'd flown into Toronto after the Amsterdam falling apart, meaning that they started the bed-in Amsterdam, but they weren't happy with how it was rolling along. So they flew into Toronto, Derek called Ritchie down to the King Eddie, where they discussed another place, another venue, and they agreed that Montreal was the place because of the closeness to New York and more established at that time. So so then and then they asked Richie to be part of helping them get the media there. So it took him about 6 seconds to decide that he was going to leave the Globe and Mail and work for John and Yoko. So there he is, taking notes and doing his thing in that lovely photo, which is also a Gerry Deiter photo. And then next door is one of Ritchie's kept things. So there's 2 coat hangers there that are from the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. One had John's coat on it, one had Yoko's coat on it. The other is a pressing of a flower that was also part of the background flowers that he kept. Ritchie was very big on flora and fauna, shall we say. So these are some of the unusual things that we have in his archive. And of course, he worked with lots of other people, not just John and Yoko. So we can go to the next one now. Thank you. And so this is again a fabulous picture of Ritchie. In the picture is Ronnie Hawkins with the dark beard, and then in the purple outfit is Wanda Hawkins. Kneeling on the floor is Anthony Fawcett, and then right in the back is John Brower. John Brower is the put together the Toronto Pop Festival, where John and Yoko played for the very first time. And there's a big story attached to that as well. Well, I suppose we can, it's sort of a bit out of place telling it this story now, but yeah, Ritchie was in the Apple offices when John Brower rang them to say, please, I'm having this festival, I've got a great bill, would you like to come over? And they were very puzzled by who is this dude, is it real, blah, blah, blah. And John called out, let's talk to Ritchie. Ritchie knows, he's from Canada, and called him into the room. And I actually have the recording of this conversation that went on. I actually have a recording of this, where John Brower says, "We'd like you to come to the festival, blah blah blah." And so, who is this man? And Ritchie goes, "Oh yes, no, look, I know John, and it's going to be great. It'll be really good, and let's just get it together." And so very quickly they put together the band: Eric Clapton, Klaus Voormann. As Joan said, the beginning of the Plastic Ono band, first time they played, that without the Beatles. Ritchie could have broken up the Beatles, maybe. It's been said. But John, look, I do know John was overwhelmed and so grateful. He then saw that he could stand alone by himself. And of course, Yoko was the conduit to make that happen. She was so vital to his coming out by himself. So the next photo here is actually John and Yoko trying on jumpsuits in Le Chateau in Toronto. The picture in the centre is the jumpsuit that was given to Ritchie by John to go on the War Is Over tour campaign. And I'll quickly do a bit of a show and tell, because this photo here, let's get it right. Oops. Hang on. Where we go. That's right. There we go. So there's Richie there with Ronnie and signs on the red China border, and he's in the jumpsuit as we speak. That was the uniform John gave him to travel the world. And yes, that's part of the archive. I have that jumpsuit. And yeah, what more can I say about that photo? Joan has the belt.
Yes. Well, it's one of these crazy things, right? That I was living on Yonge Street at the time, and I don't know why, but I was right opposite Le Chateau, and I decided I would go there and take a look, do some shopping. And when I went in, I could see there was a bit more of a fuss going on, but I saw a belt that I really liked, and I went and yes, I just happened to have it. I put it on, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw Yoko Ono behind me trying it on too. So I immediately bought it, even though I was making a pittance, working in advertising. But, when Minnie showed me that photograph, I always thought that I knew it was something that Yoko Ono had. I never knew whether she bought it. But, well, it's only 2 weeks ago, I guess, that I saw that picture, Minnie. And I think, how can our lives somehow be already connected?
Synchronized. Yeah, exactly. We talk about that often, don't we? Yeah. Just one other thing, the train picture, by the way, that train was hired for them to go to visit Pierre Trudeau. That was on their visit. Yeah, that was, yeah. And they also did several interviews in the train as well.
And I believe that it was purely Ritchie's influence, because he loved trains, that they took the train there.
Correct.
And one of the interesting things about it that I discovered is that whenever the Beatles, left a show or were out somewhere, fans always mobbed the car. They mobbed the taxi, they mobbed the limousine, whatever. And John and Yoko were always afraid that a fan would get run over or hurt in some way, because it was impossible to stop them. People magically knew when they were coming out of somewhere. So when they decided to come back to Montreal to be part of that War Is Over launch, he solved the problem by saying, go by train. And so they pulled into a private siding, which is under the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, which is part of the the rail network, and were able to arrive without any really much fanfare at all, just a press release.
Exactly. And just a FYI, I actually found the business card of the guy who he hired the train from.
Oh.
You seem to have a lot in the archive.
Well, what a pack rat.
He kept everything. Yes, he kept everything. Yeah. So we've done that. Thank you. And we can press this button and have a listen to this, because this was Ronnie Hawkins is very much involved because of actually what Joan was saying about them being mobbed all the time. When they came into Toronto in late December after the BED-IN, they were then working on the Peace Festival and the Peace and the War is Over campaign. So Ritchie organised them to stay at Ronnie Hawkins' house in Mississauga. And I have many interviews with Ronnie, and very funny about what happened. There was lots of stuff that happened there. So in doing that preparation, they came up with many different ideas, and this was one of them. We can hit the button now, please.
Okay. This is Radio Peace. This is Radio Peace. This is Radio Peace. Oh, this is Radio Peace.
Oh,
Wonderful. Yeah.
fantastic, Minnie.
That was a bit of advertising to go with their radio, because that's what they were doing also. Ritchie was working on building a peace radio network. And so this was part of the publicity. And of course, I found these things out with another show and tell happening. I found this out because this is the War is Over scrapbook that has all the information regarding where they were going, notes found, newspaper article. I can't go through it all, but this is where lots of information is found, including the lists of radio stations that they contacted at the time.
Amazing.
The interesting thing about that is that, of course, once again, they're using humor to get attention. That was in the unpublished interview that, if you get somebody laughing, you're halfway to convincing them.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
Exactly, yeah. And so the next one, oh yes, again, who would have thought that I could have, Ritchie, of course, kept all these notebooks. These are a journalist, he's got hundreds of notebooks. And this particular one was an old one. I sensed that it was an old one because different colour, etc. So I opened the first page of it, and here's a handwritten transcribe of Aretha Franklin interview, followed by a Keith Richards interview, and then on down. But something tapped me on the shoulder. I believe it's Ritchie tapped me on the shoulder and said, keep looking. And I found this in the back of this particular notebook. And again, this was the thinking behind the complete movement. So this is a voting slip. Let's vote. Do we want peace or not? And that's how far they went. I was delighted to find that, delighted.
Well, I'm interested to see that too, because in the interview done at the bed-in, Lennon said, "I've never voted."
Yes, that's
Can you
right.
Imagine?
That's right.
So to go from never voting to this,
wanted to make it happen. Well, John and Yoko understood people power. They understood that is the only way things have ever changed. Who would think that we'd be talking about that right now? I think it's most appropriate that we talk about that right now. And this is what was happening. John and Yoko were well before their time, in that they understood, that power that we have by standing together. Also, as part of this too, they also came up with the concept of AP, after peace. So that was to hit in 1970, along with the War is Over, the After Peace campaign. So yes, I have some other documents that, sorry, I haven't got the show and tell for that one, but yes, there is more. And then we move on to the, mass part of it. Here's Ritchie with the War is Over handbills, and here's a little show and tell. That is one of those. That's an original one of those. And of course, the bigger one behind me is the same as what's on the wall there. So, and you can see that he's putting them into letters, to be posted, something that we don't do anymore. But yes, he was doing all these kind of things back in the day. And then the next lot of photo, the next one, is where they started plastering them all around the country. These ones are in Toronto, so they really went hard there in Canada. And of course, John and Yoko were delighted that this was happening, absolutely delighted. And we mentioned, we'll talk about John Kosh now? Maybe should.
Sure.
Maybe. Because the next one, is the large size billboard. And Joan has John Kosh, album jacket designer, very good friend of Ritchie's, worked with the Beatles, with John and Yoko, and designed the poster, This War Is Over poster. And Joan has an essay that John wrote for her. Go ahead, Joan, your turn.
Right. This was an essay that John Kosh wrote for me. A highlight for me was my collaboration with John and Yoko on the War Is Over If You Want It campaign. The Vietnam War was still raging. The initial design started out as a simple Christmas card. John was forever jotting down notes and drawing up ideas. They were in their minimalist period, so I knew the right graphic alternatives to explore. Everything was in black and white and very direct. Suddenly, the Christmas card turned into a worldwide campaign. War Is Over If You Want It was to be revealed in December 1969, so I had to work feverishly. Billboard companies were calling me for specifications to fit displays 300 feet wide and 40 feet high for Times Square in New York City. Tourist boats circling Manhattan needed huge banners. The phone never stopped ringing. It dawned on me that we were doing something very, very important. John and Yoko were getting maximum publicity planting acorns for peace in front of a display of War Is Over posters. I enjoyed every moment. John Kosh, 2010.
That's lovely.
So, yeah, there we are. And again, I'm very grateful to Yoko for helping us to put this out there.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for those presentations. I think now we'll just proceed with some more informal questions that you can answer and banter about. I'd like to say, first of all, that it's been a delight getting to know both of you over the course of this public program. And one thing that was very clear was that the two of you have a wonderfully meaningful relationship. The rapport that you share, the excitement you have for each other's work, it's certainly in the spirit of John and Yoko. So with that, a really simple question, tell us a little bit about how you two met and how you met Gerry and Richie and some of those stories.
Well, I can start with Gerry. It's just goes to show you should talk to people when you go to a pub. I have a favorite pub here in Victoria, and one autumn there was a guy sitting in the corner with a little sailor's cap on, and my friends who are regulars there, they said, you got to go and talk to this guy. He's so interesting. That he'd been a photographer in Greenwich Village, and of course had many different things happen until he arrived with his boat, where he was a liverboard, and so I started to get to know him, and I realized that he was the genuine article. He'd really done everything that he said, and that was 2001. He'd been shocked by 9/11 and said, I can't believe people are still bombing and killing each other. I'm going to try and rekindle, he said, rekindle the spirit of give peace a chance. And that was when he went down into his boat, went down into not quite a shoebox, but an old Kodak box, and brought up these slides and negatives. He only printed maybe about 12 of them, but they were enough to be in a local gallery. And when I went with him one evening to take a look at them, the show was over and they were sitting on the floor, and they were so beautiful to look at. I said, what are they doing on the floor? I'll help you. So that was how I got to know Gerry, and we worked together in between my job, and by the time 2005 came around, there was a proper exhibition that was at the Royal BC Museum. It was a gallery style, framed photographs. And on December the 8th, we did a very spirited tribute to John Lennon. And on December the 9th, I got a phone call that still chokes me up. It was one of my friends from the pub saying that Gerry had dropped dead that next morning.
Mm.
And it was such a shock. But I have to say, to this day, I do have a little laugh, because he went exactly the way that he wanted. He had the newspaper tucked under his arm with his picture on the front page of the entertainment section. So, you know, what can I say? It was, if he had to exit quickly, that was the way to go. It's almost like, you almost feel like, well, gee, did like Lennon reach down and say, come on, Gerry, you know,
Come visit. Yeah.
you've done it. And then meeting Minnie was a complete and utter act of synchronicity, because I became immersed in the book. I was getting it all together, looking for information, and unable to identify a lot of people in the photographs, such as those group pictures where you see Ritchie sitting down there by the bed. And I went to a fellow who was an expert on that time, and he said, well, there's Ritchie Yorke. I said, well, wow. I tried to find him because, of course, he hadn't been in Canada for many, many years. And I realized through the Google search, he'd gone back to Australia, gone back to Brisbane, worked for the paper there. But no matter how much I tried to find an email or contact the paper, send an email, even phoning, I could not find him. I had a completely different thing to do, doing a little bit of work for the Ideas program on CBC Radio, and I had to phone an ad agency to find out some information. And when I called the ad agency, well, turned out somebody I knew worked there. And when I spoke with her, she said, well, what else are you doing now, Joan? And I was pretty tired of talking about the bed-in to people, and I didn't really want to tell her, but I thought, oh, because it'd been an hour on the phone. Anyhow, I went, oh, well, I'm working on a book. I'm doing a book about John and Yoko at the BED-IN-FOR-PEACE in Montreal. And she said, oh, you got to talk to Ritchie Yorke. He's working in the office next door. That's how we met. Ritchie and Minnie were over from Australia, and he was a friend of the ad agency owner.
What are the odds?
Yeah. We use the office media profile. Patrick Gossage, Pierre Trudeau's ex-press secretary. Richie's old mate. That's a whole set of other stories. And yeah, we used to use the office when we went over, and who would have thought that Joan would ring up and she was able to say, oh, Richie's here in the office right now.
I'll never forget it. It's almost as good as when I wanted a beer sponsor for my book launch, right? And it turned out that the hotel didn't have a bar. This was 2009. I was like, I can't have a book launch without beer. Put my hands up over the computer and I said, please God, send me a beer sponsor. And an hour later, on my Google alert comes John Lennon Chang beer. I thought, what can that mean? So I read the press release, and the CEO in New York of Chang beer, his name was John Lennon. So I called him up and asked if he would give some beer. And he did. Many cases, 2 bartenders and some vodka.
Wow.
Beautiful. I remember. And at Ritchie, of course, because we were in Canada at the time, Joan was doing a book launch. And so Ritchie, of course, was there at that book launch helping her do just that.
Yes.
And then, of course, we met again at the 40th anniversary of the BED-IN.
Yes, at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. And for the first time, Ritchie re-entered room 1742.
Oh, wasn't that a powerful experience? Oh, it was so powerful.
Yeah, it was.
Extremely.
Well, it's crazy, even though the room has been modernized and it is a very, very good place to get the history of the bed-in, there's still some magic in there, you just can't help but feel it, whether it's, well, I suppose it's like a temple or a church or something,
Joan, for some of our listeners who might not know, can you tell us a little bit about what they've done to the room? to memorialize it?
Yeah, they've expanded it to include the other two rooms that the Lemons had rented, and it has artwork in it. It has a vintage telephone where Yoko has recorded a message. It has a vintage television that runs film clips. And then in the sitting room, there is a large set of filing cabinets, mock filing cabinets, in order to mimic what John and Yoko had actually done in one of their rooms in New York. They had a huge room with file cabinets going right up to the ceiling. And they would, if they had an idea, because they didn't want to lose any ideas, if they had an idea, they'd open a drawer and pop it in. So you look at this, at these cabinets, and I'm so happy that the Phi Center used the same creative organization to make those cabinets, to create the same thing that people will see when they come to the Contemporary Calgary.
Yes, I was just going to say, the reproduction of that filing cabinet is centered prominently in the exhibition.
Yeah, and
wonderful.
There's cameras there, which is quite interesting. I mean, who would think these things would be artifacts? But you know, that camera saw it all.
Let's talk about the fact that Gerry and Ritchie's work has been preserved in 2 publications. You mentioned the book a couple times that you've done, Joan, called Give Peace a Chance, John and Yoko's BED-IN-FOR-PEACE. But Ritchie himself also created a book, Christ You Know It Ain't Easy, John and Yoko's Battle. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about these books and the reason you decided to publish them. Maybe Minnie, you could start.
Well, this was when I've come to Ritchie's life late in the piece, and really I will just give you a little bit. I really didn't know much about him at all, other than he worked for the local newspaper at the time. I really had no idea of his largesse. We were mutual friends with a girlfriend of mine, and after I left my husband, a chat with her and him, she rings me and she says, Ritchie's looking for someone. He's got a backstage pass and a ticket to every show that comes to town. He's looking for someone to take. Are you interested? I've gone, yes, please. Thank you very much. Never thinking in a million years that we would actually fall in love, but we did. And so part of that journey was, you know, so what are you doing with your life here? Oh, well, I've got writer's block and I've got a couple of books in me. And I said, well, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Well, if you go downstairs, and when I moved into his house, downstairs from roof to ceiling, boxes and boxes and chests. And so what's all this stuff? Oh, that's Canada. I went, oh, okay. Still not knowing anything about it. But when he mentioned this book, he said, if you could go downstairs and find the boxes marked Lennon, I could get that book started. Oh my. When I opened those boxes, oh my. And that was only just one. Yes, it's a big, so of course, those pieces, he had tried to write this book. He'd started the book a couple of times, but he was never very happy with it. So off he went again. And yes, he did achieve that book, which he was very pleased about. So it talks about the years that he worked with John and Yoko, and his very clear picture of that Yoko was his muse, his gift to the world, really, because she opened that door that allowed him to create, imagine all of those beautiful songs, all of that. Yeah. Wonderful. So so he was and they became very close. They had Ritchie talks in the book a story about he back in '62 he was writing to record company. He was a budding DJ and journalist back then, and so he was writing to American record companies to bring R&B black music into Australia to play in his radio show. And many of those he brought in. And so there's a part in the book where he talks to John about just that. He hated the Beatles at the time because they were ripping off black music. He just didn't like it at all. And so he confessed that to John. And John went, yeah, I know, it was Paul's idea.
Nice. That's very good.
The other Ritchie story I like is how I may be wrong, but tell them about when he locked himself in the radio station.
Oh, well, yeah, that's this was his drive to leave Australia. Okay, he in these letters he wrote, and he got and of course I have 610 pages of carbon copy typewriter written letters, the letters that he sent out. Then I also have the letters that were returned with the albums, one of which was from Stevie Wonder, and it was Stevie Wonder's very first #1 hit and album called Fingertips Part 2. He fell in love with that song, fell in love with it. So he went into his radio station, a very provincial town in Brisbane, and he put that on. Then Monday morning, he was called down to the office and they said, please don't ever play that N-word music ever again.
Ooh.
Oh, yes. For him, that was red rag to a bull. No, he was not happy with that thought. So the following week, he actually went into the studio and locked himself in and played that song 8 times before they came down and got him out of there.
Good for him.
And here's my part of the watching Ritchie's destiny unfold, because in 2015 we actually got to meet Stevie Wonder and tell him that story. And
nice.
Yeah, it was I've got the pictures. I've got the pictures. What happened? Ritchie, of course, was ill, so he was in a wheelchair and oxygen tubes. And so his opening line to Stevie was, Fingertips Part 2 changed my life. Well, with that, Stevie instantly had his attention. Like, who would know that? Who would know that song kind of stuff? And then, of course, we relayed the story to him and he just was overwhelmed. Gave Ritchie the biggest cuddle. But again, Ritchie was a man who was able to pick talent. And that was one of his very first picks.
Wonderful.
Yeah, great story. It was fabulous. Fabulous for him to be able to do that complete 360 before he passed was just fantastic. Fantastic.
Joan, can you tell us a little bit about your book that you've created?
Yeah, it's a small book. It's about let me see now, maybe 50 pages. It has essays in it from eyewitnesses that were there. And it has my most interesting photographs. And of course, it has Gerry Deiter's story. Anybody who buys it, they love it. They linger over it. And I actually had a mock Canadian stamp made just for fun. Because I really wanted Canada to do a stamp to commemorate the BED-IN, but I was too late, actually. You need 2 years, they told me. I tried to get it fast-tracked, and my local MLA did his best, but they missed out on that opportunity. But I'm very proud of the book. It's available, of course, at your gift shop there. And it's available through me personally, because these things are not easy to distribute, really. So if anybody is looking, and they are, people who want to find out, they can check with the information on the recording of this program.
Perfect. Thanks, Joan. So moving on.
And of course, Ritchie's. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, please.
I was just going to comment, Ritchie's book's available through our website.
Excellent. Thank you. So it often comes up in conversation with visitors to the exhibition that so much of this work and all that history feels incredibly relevant today. You even briefly talked about it already. But the phrase, we need this now more than ever, has been uttered to me many, many times. So, work that enlists people to advance a mission of love and peace just feels like it's needed desperately today. Now, for John and Yoko, these projects were handled differently than most protests or demonstrations that might have happened. I wonder if you can speak to these differences, and moreover, imagine if John and Yoko were to do this work today. What do you think it might look like?
Well, one of the reasons why they did it in a hotel room was because Martin Luther King had been shot, Bobby Kennedy had been shot, and they knew that they did not want to bring their message of peace and activism standing behind a lectern. And I'm quite sure it was Yoko's knowledge of performance art and her own ability to be out there that they decided to do it in a protected environment, such as a hotel room, where if anything untoward was to happen, there would be people right there to stop it right away. And that's why it was in my opinion, what I've researched, that's why it happened under those circumstances. The other aspect of it is that I think every year somebody does a bed-in. It's so easy to have fun with it. It's so easy to be to be part of a group activity, you might say. So that's my feeling about the bed-in. It was a safety measure.
Minnie, what do you think it would look like today?
Well, I did mention that Ritchie actually interviewed Yoko and asked that question of Yoko, and I couldn't pull up the interview to actually be able to give it to you, but I remember her saying things like, of course, John would so much understand the power of social media, that he would have been right onto it and would have changed the world. I really believe that he had and of course, it's been said that because he was so powerful speaking for youth, that's why, yes, that's part of why he's not here today, really. We won't go into that. but yeah, it has been said that he would definitely be using his power for good and not evil, and make them stand and take notice, we understand what's going on. The corporate dollar is number one these days, and we've forgotten the peace and love element in amongst it. But again, what's happening with COVID, I see right now, is that we're having to reevaluate the whole playing field. I think that's a bonus. I think that's a shift in consciousness, and John would be loving it if he was still here.
We are at 5 to 6 here locally. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to throw it out to our attendees to see if there's any questions from them. So my question is, the BED-IN campaign and other projects, The War is Over, were powerful demonstrations, but it's important to remember they were also making art. So what are your thoughts on art and activism? And furthermore, the relationship of art with this notion of the power of intention. So that is, if we set our mind to something, it can happen. For example, war is over, but it's always with that tagline, if you want it, like you need to want it. So I wonder if you could speak to those relationships with art and how you see the BED-IN and war is over from an artistic perspective.
When I had my exhibition going and people went through it, I felt that it had an effect of letting the individuals know that they should express themselves. They should write songs. They should do art to get their messages across, and to not be afraid to do it. And then art, the very nature of it, draws people together. So it's a good way. It's a good way to get discussion going and to bring people together.
Absolutely, absolutely. The sadness of COVID right now, in Australia, I can speak to, is that the art and music and culture have not really been recognised in amongst the chaos. We've got the football games happening, lots of that kind of stuff happening, crowds, big crowds of people going in, but we're still not able to dance in a venue. You know, like just that's unconscionable that we don't recognise that culture and art are part of our infrastructure, part of our soul. We all need to keep that alive and well. And it really rubs me up the wrong way that the people who have the power don't get that, really.
People
Really?
are afraid of art. Authority figures are afraid of art. I can see I'm getting a low battery on my computer here. I might have to vanish for a second.
We've been chatting a while. That's great. I don't see any questions yet, so I will encourage people to, if they have some questions, to go ahead and do that. We'd love to hear from you, and Joan and Minnie would be happy to answer any questions you might have about the bed-in, about War's Over, about Gerry or Ritchie. Maybe I'll ask another question then, which is, what's next for you? What's next for you, Minnie? What are your long-term plans for Ritchie's archives?
Well, I just sent you some information about I've been given an opportunity to have the top floor of a building that's called the Prince Consort. It's a hotel in Brisbane. And the top floor of this building is a music hub where there's a recording studio and lots of music offices in there. And so they're going to call it the Yorke Suites. And I've been asked to decorate 2 green rooms as well as decorate the hallways of this building. So we're putting copies of the art, as wallpaper.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Chris, my creative director, who is absolutely brilliant genius, and I very much am grateful to him. Yeah, he's come up with a fabulous concept. So that's one part. But I also am in talks with the State Library as well because of the documentation. I'm hoping that they will be able to take that on and preserve that for me. And I'm also working on documentary. I believe that we have enough footage and enough stuff to be able to do that. And the other project that I'd like to be able to pull off is Richie's Memoirs. I have about 6-7 chapters and an outline of what he wanted. So I believe that I might be able to help put that together. And then, of course, the other project that I have is Embedding Peace, which is a photo booth, an exact replica of the bed-in. Because of my props and wardrobe background, I was able to conjure up this this presentation, and we've taken it into Woodford Folk Festival, which is a festival that attracts 250,000 people for a week. And I dress people in white clothes and I put them in that bed, and I cannot begin to tell you the overwhelming consciousness that people have. They just like, oh, I understand this peace and love thing, you know. I educate lots of people. There's so many kids that who's John, who is John? No, I don't know. What about Yellow Submarine? Oh yes, I know who you're talking about. So I educate young people that people power and activism is a good thing. Standing together is a good thing. That's the purpose of it. And actually last night at the opening of the hotel, I was offered some space till Christmas to be able to put the bed up and share that moment, because again, it's very timely. Right now, it's very timely that we come back to this connection that we all really have. Peace and love.
Joan, how about you? What's next for the archives of Gerry Deiter?
I don't know, you know. I feel that I've done everything that I can do with it. I'm very, very satisfied with it. I'm more than honored that it is part of Yoko Ono growing freedom. 19 pictures and being in close association with Yoko is a tremendous, tremendous honor. Um, I'm just going to see what happens. That's
great.
really what I
When
want
you
to
can
do.
come to Australia, when you can
Yes.
come to Australia, we will be putting on a show. Okay.
Yes. You know what? That's right. That's right. Thank you for that reminder, Minnie. It'll be exclusive just to you.
Correct, darling. Correct.
Okay.
Then we
All
could
right.
travel. Then we could travel. Take it round the world. Let's
That's
do that.
right.
Go around the world one more time.
Why
That's
not? This is not ever going to be not relevant, I think, this
Exactly.
material, you know, so there's always going to be a need to share this story. I'm seeing that there are not any questions from our attendees. Do you have any questions for each other?
Hi, Ryan. Sorry.
Oh, hi, Kate.
We do have some Q&As actually, so I'll just pop in to maybe ask a couple of them. Is that all right?
Oh, great. Yes, thank you.
Fab. So the first question is, what exactly does it mean the war is over if you want it?
Take it away, Minnie.
I believe it's a very simple message. John and Yoko particularly is the queen of one-liners, absolute queen, okay? What she can say in one line with a few words are always very powerful. Emails from her are excellent. And what you see, war is over, is that if you want it, it's all about what comes from us. It's a very simple message. And of course, as John Koch said, Christmas card. Happy Christmas, war is over. So a multiple of things it says in 3 big words and a few little ones underneath.
They always said that when they were questioned at the bed-in, are you going to start a peace foundation? And they said, no, not at all. It's up to the individual. And that war is over if you want it, places the responsibility solely on the individual's shoulders.
Correct.
One of the things I really liked about War is Over too is that it reads like a headline. It's not a motto. It's like, this is like a newspaper, like it's done. It's saying this is a reality. And so it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's part of that power of intentionality we were talking about a little earlier. We have multiple futures that we can consider, but we need to imagine the kind of futures that we want.
Exactly. Imagine peace.
I read that when they were thinking of it just as a Christmas card, that they had a party and they hired an actor to suddenly burst through the door and go through the crowd saying, "War is over if you want it. War is over if you want it."
Perfect.
That's a Yoko for sure.
All right, we've got a couple more.
Sure.
We've got a couple more questions.
Go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
So the next one is, were you involved in any peace movement activities in the late 60s and early 70s?
Yes. I marched in the Vietnam. I was marching when the Vietnam War was going on. I was on the corner selling socialist workers' papers. Yes, I've been there poking the stick for quite some time. And just as a sidebar, recently I've been standing in solidarity with refugees that have been locked up in this country for 8 years. Terrible, locked up, and the government have, the no boats thing that happened in Australia, and they're being very litigious about keeping these poor people. There's 2 guys have been from 15 years old, have been in confinement 8 years. It's just very wrong indeed. Sorry, I digress.
Well, I wasn't in the 60s. No, I was getting ready to have a career in advertising. But certainly for the last, I would say probably the last 12 years, I have been involved in Indigenous rights and also for improved help for the disabled.
Mm.
Oh, nice.
All right, we've got one more question here. This one's probably targeted more towards Ryan and the Contemporary Calgary team, but it says, how did Contemporary Calgary achieve this amazing feat?
Well, just doing research, discovering that it was a project that was available. It seemed like something that should come to our community. Obviously, Yoko is a household name to many, but what many don't realize is her contemporary art. You know, they think of her often from the perspective of the Beatles, when in fact she's one of the most significant, you know, conceptual artists that we have. And her earlier work, her instructions, things like Grapefruit, these things set the bar very high, very early on. So that was it's always been something that she's always been an artist I've been very interested in, and one that I think could generate some great conversations. And then again, the fact that it just seems so incredibly relevant today. Her message, her art is deceptively simple. It's often very layered, but this idea of peace and love is at the core for her entire practice, and it's always been there, and it always will be. And so I think that right now, again, more than ever, we needed that.
And when you see it all together, that's when your respect goes through the roof. That's what this exhibition actually did for me, even though, you know, you'd think I'd know a lot about it, but seeing her, the time frame that it covers, it's a wonderful thing, seeing it all in context and together.
And
really
not only her artwork, but her music. You know,
Yes.
at 82, she's got #1 hits in the dance floor. You know, really, because she shares her music with new age musicians, and they take it to the top again. You know, she's a very clever woman, and again, the keeper of the flame, extraordinary. And I'm very pleased to hear that she's handing the baton to Sean. Yeah, because I do know that Sean was very anti being associated too heavily with his father. I remember an interview that Ritchie's done with Sean where he firstly says, wow, it's really interesting to talk to someone who actually knew my father. And then he followed it by saying, well, you know, I don't want to be in his footsteps. I don't want to be his shadow, you know. So, I'm glad he's matured to that. And of course, the other beautiful thing is that Julian and Sean have a beautiful relationship now, which is fabulous. Again, that was fractured at one stage, but it's back together. I'm just going to put it out there. I believe that the two of them need to re-record Imagine. I think that would be such a powerful statement to the world right
now. Yeah.
Right now. I'm putting it out there. Let's go.
Make it happen, Minnie. I love it.
That's right.
Wonderful. Well, if there are no further questions, in wrapping things up, then I'd just like to extend our warmest thanks to you both. You've been beyond generous and gracious, sharing these important and compelling archives of Gerry, Deiter, and Richie Yorke. It's been a pleasure listening to your stories and your insight on these, again, timely and relevant topics. The reality is, you're all part of the story of John and Yoko now. You and Joan and Minnie are part of that story, and that's incredibly cool. But it's also an incredible privilege, and it's very clear that both of you take your roles seriously and passionately. I feel like we should all sing "Give Peace a Chance" as we fade to black or something, but instead I'll just
off you go.
I'll just say thank you and invite people to experience the exhibitions and Gerry and Richie's archives, which will be on view until January 31st. And I will give Yoko Ono the last word in one of my favorite quotes, "A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality."
Correct.
And I just think that's lovely. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you for attending.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks everyone
Bye.
for being with
Yeah.
us.
Love is all you need. Love is all you need.